Hey everybody, back with another short bat chat without Captain Logan on another, a smaller topic. This time we're going to be talking about how do you write Bruce Wayne. I kind of want to do more of these. I kind of want to do how do you write Jason Todd, how do you write Tim Drake, how do you write Nightwing. I did a video on my channel just a little while ago with Alex and John about our DC universe, and I talked about the limitations and the problems of writing Batman, and they all had really great ideas on how to reinvent the DC universe and Batman specifically. And so I just want to quickly talk about here, I don't know how long this will run, probably like 5 or 10 minutes, but I want to quickly talk about how you should write Bruce Wayne. Previously, last week, I did a video on the problem of I'm Batman, the problem of Batman can solve anything. And so this time I want to follow up on that and say, well, okay, here's how I would fix the problem. So here's the thing about Batman. As tragic as it is to lose both of your parents in front of you, as horrifying and as painful as that is, and how I couldn't possibly imagine that pain, he was 9 years old. Stretch, maybe he was 12. You know, he was a kid. And he has 10, 20 years of world-shaping experience, of perspective-building experience, to put that in perspective. He has extraordinary means. He's got a butler that waits on him hand and foot. He's got an empire to run. He doesn't have to worry about what is he going to do with his life because it's right there for him. As much as Bruce lost that day, he gained so much freedom. Now, I'm not saying Batman should get over the death of his parents. I think he needs to come to accept it. So, if I were to write Bruce Wayne, I would want him to be the most uncultured, cultured man possible. I would want him to be I would want him to be Frasier, but cool, I guess. Well, I mean, Frasier is a different kind of cool. I'd want him to be Frasier, but more modern, you know? There's a great scene in The Batman where there's an opera, and Bruce is listening to the opera, but at the same time he's got like an earbud listening to like pop music. Bruce Wayne in that series is sitting there in the Batcave building giant mechanical monstrosities. Alfred's like, what does that do? And Bruce is like, I don't know, but it's kind of cool. And he just sits there eating nachos, you know? Like, he's a kid that didn't grow up in an emotional sense in letting go of his parents, but he's also a kid that didn't grow up. He's also a guy that is able to stay a child for a longer period of time, psychologically speaking. And you could take this one of two ways. You could take this as Bruce Wayne knows a lot. He's a really, really smart guy. He's always the smartest guy in the room. He's always the best guy in the room. But he's extremely immature about it. Or you could take it the other direction and say that Bruce has become utterly enlightened. One of my biggest issues with Batman going around the world to train is that we seem to have a very loose definition of what he did. He learned how to fight. He learned criminology. He learned science. But did he also learn philosophy? And I mean, that's not me as a philosophy guy throwing that in there. He learned martial arts. Martial arts are physical expressions of Eastern philosophy, right? You look at Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's got great action movies, but you have to realize Bruce Lee had a complex mental thought process, an extremely complex philosophy. One of my best friends, he's getting his master's with me, and I keep talking to him about this. He's a massive Bruce Lee fan, and I've been trying to tell him for months now that he should write his master's thesis on Bruce Lee's philosophy and its implication on feminism, because it's just so dense. It's got a fantastic meaning. It's got fantastic symbolism. You can't learn most martial arts without understanding the philosophical reasons for why they exist. And so, did Bruce just do that without the philosophy? In which case, he would have to teach himself because most masters wouldn't let him do it that way. Or he did, and then he just chose to forget about it, in which case he didn't really master any of them. And so if I was going to write Batman, I would have to have him understand that. I'd have to have him, if he's going to fight like Bruce Lee, he's got to think like Bruce Lee. He's got to be able to understand that perspective. And you don't have to do that by making him into a wise, tranquil sage. You can still do the childness. You can still do the immatureness. You could do a Bruce Wayne that can hold his own in complex philosophical arguments with people much older than him, and he can have those complex debates and hold his own. He could go to Harvard's PhD philosophy program and have a reasonable, extremely articulate argument against their department head, and still just be really relaxed and still be extremely chill. Because Western philosophy, Eastern philosophy have got lots of differences, mostly in demeanor, I think. If you watch the debate we did on Geek Evolution of Batman vs. Spider-Man, most Western philosophical debates have kind of the sort of no-nonsense face I had, just because that's the way I'm trained. Eastern philosophy doesn't have that. Eastern philosophy is a lot more relaxed. And so you pair this guy with more money than he knows what to do with, a butler, no parents to tell him what to do, and going around learning how to beat the crap out of people and learning how to think. You know, you're sort of crafting the ultimate child dream. You're almost crafting the ultimate child psychology. And we don't tend to write him like that. That's why I like the Batman as much as I do, is because it's that kind of Bruce Wayne. It's the kind of Bruce Wayne that doesn't take himself too seriously. And I hate when Bruce Wayne does that. I hate when you write a Bruce Wayne that has this extremely, extremely immature outlook on the world. And I say immature in a different sense here. Immature in the sense that it's not well reasoned. So, for example, you have lots of Batman stories where Batman's like, well, I'm a logical thinker, and I can't believe this because there's no reason to believe it. That I need empirical evidence, and that I need this fancy chain of logical connective threads that make me understand anything that's going on here. And that's not how logic works. Even if you take the most complex of logic classes, I mean, in every logic class I took, in every logical translation class I ever took, the biggest through line that all of my logistics professors would tell me is logic can't translate everything. Hell, it can't translate half of everything. Logic has lots of problems. Logical structure loses meanings more than it gains meanings. Wittgenstein in his Tractatus, the sort of be-all, end-all piece on what Western logic is defined as, ends with him saying that, look, this is all great for fancy formulations and debates and stuff, but it doesn't explain art, it doesn't explain ethics, it doesn't explain half of what makes us human beings. Every time you build an argument and you have premises lead to conclusions, you have to understand that by definition, a premise is something that you have no reason to believe in. Even Sherlock Holmes has said that even Sherlock Holmes has talked about that if something is extremely improbable, it's still possible, you know? Like, he had a degree of skepticism. Batman becoming a cold, logical being, about being all about his methods, about being all about the dehumanized work, screams as extremely immature in the wrong way. It screams as extremely immature in the sense that clearly this guy never got out of got past page 1 of most of the books he's claimed to have read. There are multiple points where Batman's trying to be pseudo-intellectual and he's just cold and standoffish, and that's not what real intellectualism does to you. That's not what real intellectualism is like, particularly from a guy who supposedly spent most of his life training in the East, the place that abandons that sort of mindset. If Batman's supposed to be a ninja, he can be cold to a degree, but he needs to have the human experience built in. And so, if you're going to write Bruce Wayne, you have to understand what these experiences would do to you. You can't just start writing things that sound like something smart to say, and you can't just start writing things that, like Bruce Wayne and Batman are separate entities. You have to start thinking about them as how they would translate into actual human experience and actual human beings. Now, if I was writing Batman, the biggest through line for me, for a younger Bruce Wayne, before we even get to the Robins, would be that this is a guy that spends all of his free time reading old ancient thought and talking about it in extremely modernist terms. He'd be a guy that... He'd be the guy that can explain to you the word origins, the purposes of, and the philosophical understanding of words like bourgeois and jejune, and then still call you a moron for using them in standard conversation. He would be, I guess, almost sort of, not hipstery, but more of just... He's got the intellectualism, but he's also got an extreme angst built into that, right? Like, he's a kid that lost his parents. He's angry, but he's also a kid that doesn't have parents. He's happy. There's a conflict of those emotions, and so he would know everything there is to know about everything, or at least to a reasonable degree, because I don't want him to know everything. He would know everything there is to know about certain topics, about certain ideas, about certain thought processes, and he'd be extremely layman about it. He wouldn't want to put on airs in the way that I think we often try to write him as. And so the difference between Batman and Bruce Wayne would more so come about in the way they're exemplified with Superman, where Batman is a vague extrapolation of who Bruce Wayne is, the way kind of Morrison wrote him. And Bruce Wayne would be the person. Bruce Wayne would be the kid that's angry and happy and free and trapped all at once, and broadens his mind with as much thinking as possible, but then still limits it based on his demeanor. And then Batman tries to become devoid of all that, and he can only do that to a certain degree. And so Batman would become about the performance, about the theatrics, about the limited urban legend presence. And Bruce Wayne would become about the exploration of deeper ethical and human ideas through a more kind of naturalistic lens, through a more Bruce Wayne is just a dude kind of sense. I mean, he would be a multi-billionaire in his 20s with no worries about what he's going to do. I mean, like, just think about this for a second, okay? Put yourself in the shoes of someone that's, say, 19 years old. They just started college, maybe they're in their second year of college, and they are trying to figure out what they want to major in. They don't know where they're going. One, they don't know what their career path is going to be. They don't know where they're going to live year to year. They don't know what it's like to be in the real world, depending on their real life experience. They don't know what their personal relationships are going to be like. They don't know how to deal with all this change. You take all these standard normal people issues, Bruce Wayne doesn't have to worry about any of that. It's all gone. He doesn't care. Where is he going to go after college? Wayne Enterprises. What's he going to do for money? Wayne Enterprises. Where is he going to live? Wayne Manor. Who's going to help feed him and stuff? Alfred. He's got everything solved. He comes from a very particular bubble existence, and in a way that's extremely tragic and extremely limiting. And that's where the immaturity would come from. That's where the eating nachos and listening to pop music instead of opera would come from. But then he's also got a desire to know more and to break out of that bubble, and that's where the knowledge of opera would come from, the knowledge of philosophy would come from, the ability to do martial arts would come from. Joss Whedon always talks about this. Joss Whedon talks about how there needs to be a friction of ideas in order for a story to work or for a story to be told. And we don't seem to do that enough with Batman. We don't have enough friction in his conception anymore. And so the whole way I would write Bruce Wayne is you'd want to make a friction between sort of the best possible outcome of what he went through and the worst possible outcome he went through. And Bruce is a person that has his life defined for him to an enormous degree. One of my favorite pieces of symbolism through Frank Miller's work is that the world has demanded that Bruce Wayne become Batman. No matter what he did or didn't do, the world guided him into being Batman. And so you have that with my Bruce Wayne. You'd have that where no matter what he does, he's going to be Batman. No matter what he does, where he is in life is going to be predetermined. But that's going to create a desire in him to be free. That's where the ethics comes from. That's where his absolute no-kill rule comes from, because being moral requires the assumption of free will, and Bruce Wayne, a person that lacks that sort of free will, is going to do his most to fight for it. And I think that would give it a different dimension. That would give the anger a different weight. It would give the relatability a different weight. It would give the presence of Batman a different weight. It would be about the human experience. It'd be about the limitations of the humanity. No more of this, I can do this because I'm Batman nonsense. More of, ought I do this if I were Batman kind of situations, I think would be the best way to summarize it. So yeah, I kind of rambled on a little bit too long here, and I know a lot of this was sort of abstract and vague because, I'm not actually writing Batman comics. I wish I was, but I'm not. Let me know what you guys think of my idea. Let me know what you think in the comments. Well, how would you write your Bruce Wayne? What would your thought process be on that character? Do you think he's been well written the past few decades? Also, it'd be great to know what people's favorite Batman stories are in the comments, just out of curiosity. We're talking about how to write Bruce Wayne. It's only fitting that you talk about your favorite examples of how Batman were written. Thanks, everybody, for watching, and I'll see you next time.